The gunshot wound in her side had bled through the threadbare blanket she clutched around her shoulders, leaving a dark stain that spread across the hay beneath her like spilled wine. Harrison Clarke stood in the doorway of his barn that cool September morning in 1878, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips as he stared at the young woman curled up in the corner stall. His ranch sat 5 miles outside Yosemite, California, tucked into the foothills where the Sierra Nevada mountains cast long shadows across his grazing land. In the 3 years since Margaret's fever had taken her, leaving him alone at 32 with nothing but cattle and memories, he had grown accustomed to solitude. He had not grown accustomed to finding bleeding strangers in his barn. The woman stirred at the sound of his boots crunching through scattered straw. Her eyes flew open, wide and dark with fear, and she scrambled backward despite the obvious pain it cost her. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, with long chestnut hair matted with dirt and sweat, and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the hollow exhaustion carved into every feature. "Please," she whispered, and the single word carried such desperation that Harrison found himself raising both hands in a gesture of peace. "Easy now," he said quietly, setting his coffee mug on a barrel. "I am not going to hurt you. You are bleeding. You need a doctor." "No doctor." Her voice cracked. "Please, no town. They will find me." Harrison studied her for a long moment. He had learned to read trouble during his years ranching in this wild country, and this woman carried it like a second skin. But beneath the fear in her eyes, he saw something else, something that reminded him of a doe he had once found caught in a hunter's trap, fighting even as it bled out rather than accept death quietly. "Who is looking for you?" he asked. She pressed her lips together, clearly debating whether to trust him. Finally, she said, "My husband. Former husband, I suppose, though he would not see it that way. A man who shoots his wife does not deserve to call himself a husband." A bitter laugh escaped her. "He did not shoot me. One of his men did when I tried to leave. They were supposed to stop me, not kill me, but Ned always had a heavy trigger finger." She winced, pressing her hand harder against her side. "I have been running for 2 days. Your barn was the first shelter I found. I am sorry for trespassing." Harrison moved slowly, telegraphing his intentions as he approached. "Let me see the wound." "I told you, no doctor." "I am not a doctor, but I have doctored enough cattle and horses to know what needs doing. That wound gets infected, and it will not matter whether your husband finds you or not." After another moment of hesitation, she nodded. Harrison knelt beside her in the hay, and she reluctantly moved her hand away from her side. The bullet had torn through the flesh above her hip, a nasty gash but thankfully not deep enough to have hit anything vital. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the edges of the wound were already looking angry and red. "This is going to hurt," he warned, then called out toward the barn door. "Danny!" The young ranch hand appeared moments later, his weathered face curious beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Boss." "Bring me clean water, whiskey, needle and thread and bandages from the house. Quickly." Danny's eyes widened as he spotted the woman, but he had worked for Harrison long enough to know when not to ask questions. He disappeared at a run. "My name is Harrison Clarke," Harrison said, keeping his voice gentle. "This is my ranch. You are safe here for now, but I need to know what I am protecting you from." The woman studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she took a shaky breath and said, "My name is Rose Zimmerman. Or it was, before I married Vincent Barrow 3 years ago in San Francisco." The name Barrow sent a chill down Harrison's spine. Everyone in California had heard of Vincent Barrow, the mining magnate who had made his fortune in the silver rush and expanded into railroads and shipping. He was known for his ruthlessness in business, and his political connections that reached all the way to Sacramento. Vincent Barrow, Harrison repeated slowly. The Vincent Barrow who owns half the mining operations in Nevada. Rose nodded miserably. I was 18 when my father arranged the marriage. He owed Vincent money, gambling debts he could not pay. Vincent offered to forgive everything if I would marry him. My father agreed before I even knew about it. Her voice grew hollow. I thought it would be tolerable. I thought if I was a good wife, if I did everything right, it might even become bearable. I was a fool. Danny returned with the supplies, setting them down carefully before retreating. Harrison poured whiskey over his hands and the needle, then looked at Rose. This part is not going to be pleasant. Nothing about the last 3 years has been pleasant. He cleaned the wound first, and to her credit, she barely flinched even though he knew it must have burned like hellfire. As he worked, she continued her story, the words spilling out as if a dam had broken. Vincent was not violent, not at first, just controlling. He chose my clothes, my friends, where I went and when. He had men follow me everywhere. When I objected, he would remind me that my father's life depended on my cooperation. Then about 6 months ago, things changed. He started drinking more, becoming paranoid. He accused me of plotting against him, of meeting with his business rivals. None of it was true. Harrison began stitching the wound, his hands steady despite the anger building in his chest. So you decided to run. I decided I would rather die free than live like a prisoner. Rose drew in a sharp breath as the needle pierced her skin. I had been hiding money for months, just pennies here and there that the household staff would not miss. 2 nights ago, Vincent went to Sacramento on business. I saw my chance. I made it as far as Mariposa before his men caught up. That is when Ned shot me. I managed to get away in the confusion, stole a horse, and rode until I could not stay in the saddle anymore. And the horse wandered off after I collapsed near your property line. I crawled the rest of the way. Harrison tied off the last stitch and began wrapping her midsection with clean bandages. Vincent Barrow has resources. He will not stop looking. I know. Rose's voice was barely a whisper. I probably brought death to your door by coming here. I am sorry. Once I can walk properly, I will leave. He sat back on his heels, regarding her thoughtfully. The smart thing would be to give her some supplies and send her on her way. Vincent Barrow was not a man to cross, and Harrison had worked too hard building this ranch from nothing to risk losing it all. But as he looked at Rose, at the stubborn set of her jaw despite her fear and pain, he thought of Margaret. He thought of the vows he had made in a small church in Sacramento 7 years ago, promising to honor and protect. Those vows had not died with his wife. My wife died 3 years ago, Harrison said quietly. Fever took her in the winter of '75. We had been married 4 years, and every day of it was a gift. I cannot imagine what you have endured, being bound to a man who treated you like property instead of a partner. Rose's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I am sorry for your loss. The thing is, Mrs. Barrow, Vincent can only chase you if you remain Mrs. Barrow. She frowned, confused. I do not understand. Harrison stood, brushing hay from his trousers. California law allows for divorce, but a woman running from her husband can be forcibly returned. A widow, on the other hand, is free to make her own choices. Vincent is not dead. No, but Rose Zimmerman Barrow could be. He met her gaze steadily. If Rose Zimmerman Barrow died trying to escape, and Rose Zimmerman Clarke appeared in her place, legally wed to a rancher in Yosemite, there would be nothing Vincent could do. The silence stretched between them as Rose processed his words. You are suggesting we marry. You do not even know me. I know enough. I know you would rather die than live without freedom. I know you have courage enough to run from one of the most powerful men in California. I know you are lying in my barn bleeding because someone decided you were property to be controlled." Harrison crouched down again so they were eye level. "I am not offering a love match, Mrs. Barrow. I am offering protection, a name, and the freedom to live your own life. In return, you would help run this ranch, earn your keep. We would present as a married couple to the world, and Vincent's men would be looking for a woman alone, not a rancher's wife. But you would be putting yourself at risk. If Vincent found out, let me worry about Vincent Barrow. What matters is whether you want to remain his victim or become someone new." Rose was quiet for a long moment, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Why would you do this for a stranger? Harrison thought about that. He thought about the loneliness that had filled his house like a fog since Margaret's death, the way he had thrown himself into work to avoid feeling anything at all. He thought about the kind of man who would shoot a woman for wanting her freedom. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because no one should have to live in a cage." She wiped at her tears with a dirty hand. "If we do this, I want to be clear about something. I will not be your true wife in any sense but legal. I cannot, after everything. I would not ask that of you. You would have your own room, your own space. This would be an arrangement of mutual benefit, nothing more." Rose studied him for another long moment, then slowly extended her hand. "Then I accept, Mr. Clarke, though I fear you may come to regret this kindness." Harrison shook her hand gently, mindful of her injuries. "First things first. You need rest, food, and time to heal. We can ride into town in a few days and speak to Pastor Williams about a quiet ceremony. I will spread word that I met you in Mariposa, that we courted briefly and decided to wed. It is not uncommon for widowers to remarry quickly out here. What about your ranch hand? Danny, was it? He saw me. Danny is loyal and discreet. He has been with me since I started this ranch 5 years ago. I trust him with my life and now with yours." Harrison stood, offering her his hand. "Think you can make it to the house? The spare bedroom has an actual bed, which will be more comfortable than my barn floor." Rose took his hand and struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. Harrison steadied her, and she leaned against him as they made their slow way out of the barn. The morning sun was fully up now, painting the rolling hills in shades of gold and amber. His ranch house was modest, a sturdy 2-story structure he had built himself with timber from the mountains. It had seemed too big after Margaret died, but now, helping Rose up the porch steps, it felt almost welcoming again. Inside, he guided her to the spare bedroom on the ground floor. The room was simple but clean, with a brass bed frame, a cedar wardrobe, and windows that looked out over the eastern pastures. Rose sank onto the bed with a grateful sigh. "I will bring you some food and water," Harrison said. "Try to rest. You have lost blood and your body needs time to recover." "Mr. Clarke," Rose called as he turned to leave. "Thank you, truly." He nodded, not trusting his voice, and headed to the kitchen. As he prepared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold chicken, his mind raced through everything that would need to happen. He would need to speak with Danny, make sure the hand understood the story they would tell. He would need to ride into Yosemite and arrange for the marriage, perhaps speak with Sheriff Hawkins about keeping an eye out for strangers asking questions. And he would need to prepare for the possibility that Vincent Barrow might come looking anyway, law or no law. But as he carried the tray back to Rose's room and found her already asleep, her face finally peaceful despite the pain she must be in, Harrison felt a spark of something he had not felt in 3 years. Purpose. Margaret had always said he had too much stubborn protective instinct for his own good. She would have approved of this, he thought. She would have done the same. Over the next 3 days, Rose slowly regained her strength. Harrison brought her meals and fresh water, changed her bandages with clinical efficiency, and kept his distance otherwise. She slept most of the first 2 days, her body desperately needing the rest. By the third day, she was able to sit up without wincing and even walked around the room a bit. On the fourth morning, Harrison knocked on her door with a bundle in his arms. "I thought you might want fresh clothes," he said when she answered. "These were Margaret's. You are about the same size, I think." Rose took the bundle carefully, running her fingers over the soft cotton fabric. "Your wife. You keep her things." I could not bring myself to get rid of them. Seemed wrong somehow. Harrison cleared his throat. But she would want them used, not sitting in a trunk gathering dust. She was practical that way. "Tell me about her," Rose said softly, "if it is not too painful." Harrison leaned against the doorframe, a small smile touching his lips. Margaret was fierce. Came west with her family in '69, determined to make something of herself. Her father thought ranching was no life for a woman, but she proved him wrong every day. She could rope a steer, break a horse, and still make the best apple pie in 3 counties. She saw this land when it was just empty hills and convinced me it could be something great. We built this place together, every fence post and cattle pen. She sounds remarkable. She was. The fever came on sudden that winter. One day she was fine, the next she could barely breathe. The doctor from Mariposa could not get through the snow in time. His voice roughened. She died in my arms, telling me not to waste my life grieving. Said I was too young to give up, that the ranch needed someone who would love it the way she did. Rose's eyes were bright with sympathy. "And have you? Given up, I mean?" "I have been going through the motions, I suppose. Working from sunup to sundown, falling into bed exhausted, starting it all over the next day. Danny has been patient with me, but I know I have not been the easiest person to work for." Harrison straightened. "Anyway, get dressed. If you are feeling up to it, I thought we might ride into town today. The sooner we make this official, the safer you will be." "I think I can manage." An hour later, they were riding toward Yosemite, Rose seated carefully on one of Harrison's gentler mares. She wore one of Margaret's simpler dresses, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and Harrison had helped her pin up her hair in a respectable style. To anyone who saw them, they would look like exactly what they were pretending to be, a rancher and his bride-to-be. The town of Yosemite in 1878 was still young and raw, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a main street with the spectacular valley and waterfalls visible in the distance. Settlers and miners mixed with ranchers and the occasional tourist who had heard tales of the natural wonders. Harrison guided them to the white clapboard church at the edge of town, where Pastor Williams tended to the spiritual needs of the community. The pastor was a kindly man in his 50s, with silver hair and a gentle manner. His eyes widened slightly when Harrison explained they wanted to marry, but he recovered quickly. "Harrison, I did not know you were courting anyone." "It happened quickly," Harrison said, the lie coming easier than he expected. "I met Rose in Mariposa a few months back. We have been corresponding, and well, when you know, you know." Pastor Williams smiled at Rose. "And you are certain, my dear? Marriage is a sacred commitment." Rose met the pastor's eyes steadily. "I am certain, Pastor. Harrison is a good man, and I am ready to begin a new life here." The words were true, even if the context was not. Pastor Williams seemed satisfied. "Very well. I will need to file the proper paperwork with the county, but we can perform the ceremony today if you wish. Do you have witnesses?" "Danny can stand for me," Harrison said. "Is Mrs. Williams available?" "I will fetch her." The ceremony was simple and brief. Danny arrived from his errands in town, asked no questions, and stood solemnly beside Harrison. Mrs. Williams, a plump woman with kind eyes, stood with Rose and offered her an encouraging smile. Pastor Williams read the traditional vows, and Harrison found himself speaking the familiar words with an unexpected weight to them. I, Harrison Clarke, take you, Rose Zimmerman, to be my wedded wife. I, Rose Zimmerman, take you, Harrison Clarke, to be my wedded husband. When it came time to seal the vows with a kiss, Harrison leaned in carefully and pressed his lips to Rose's forehead, a chaste gesture that made Mrs. Williams sigh romantically. Rose's hand trembled slightly in his, but she managed a smile. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Pastor Williams declared. May God bless your union. They signed the papers. Danny and Mrs. Williams added their marks as witnesses, and just like that, Rose Zimmerman Barrow became Rose Clarke. Harrison paid the pastor and accepted congratulations from the small gathering. As they left the church, Rose stumbled slightly and Harrison caught her elbow. You all right? He asked quietly. Just tired. The ride took more out of me than I expected. We will stop by the general store for a few supplies, then head back. You can rest in the wagon. At the general store, Harrison introduced Rose to the proprietor, Mr. Chen, a Chinese immigrant who had opened his shop 5 years ago and ran it with quiet efficiency despite the prejudice he sometimes faced. Harrison had always appreciated the man's fair prices and honest dealings. Congratulations on your marriage, Mr. Clarke, Mr. Chen said warmly. Mrs. Clarke, welcome to Yosemite. Thank you, Rose said. It is good to be here. As Harrison gathered supplies, Rose wandered the aisles, marveling at the simple act of choosing something for herself. She picked out fabric for a new dress, some ribbon, a few personal items. Harrison watched her examine a display of books and quietly added 2 novels to their purchases when she was not looking. They were loading the wagon when a stranger approached, a man in a fine suit that marked him as out of place in this rough town. Excuse me, he said, his voice carrying an East Coast accent. I am looking for someone. Perhaps you have seen her. Harrison's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. We see a lot of people passing through. Who are you looking for? The man pulled out a photograph. This woman, Rose Barrow. She disappeared from her home in San Francisco recently. Her husband is very worried. Harrison glanced at the photograph. It showed a younger Rose in an elaborate dress, her expression vacant and posed. She looked nothing like the woman standing beside him now, with her sun-touched skin and hair pulled back practically. Cannot say I have seen her, Harrison said truthfully, because the woman in that photograph was not the woman he knew. But I will keep an eye out. What is your name in case I need to contact you? Thomas Reed. I am staying at the hotel for a few days. The man's gaze slid to Rose, who had turned her back to browse the wagon contents. And you are Harrison Clarke. This is my wife, Rose. We just married today. Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. Your wife? How fortunate. When did you say you met? I did not say, Harrison replied evenly. But if you are staying in town, you might want to speak with Sheriff Hawkins. He keeps track of strangers passing through. I will do that. Thank you for your time. Reed tipped his hat and walked away, but Harrison could feel the man's gaze boring into his back. Once they were out of town and on the road back to the ranch, Rose finally spoke. He knows. That man, he works for Vincent. Maybe. But he has no proof of anything. As far as the law is concerned, you are Rose Clarke now, married to me before witnesses and recorded in the county register. Vincent can suspect all he wants, but he cannot touch you without evidence. You do not know Vincent. He does not need evidence. He has money and power. Harrison's jaw tightened. And I have something he does not. I have a legal claim and the home advantage. This is my land, Rose. Out here, a man's property is his castle, and no amount of money changes that. They rode in silence for a while, the mountains rising around them like ancient guardians. Finally, Rose said, I am afraid, Harrison, not for myself, but for you. You have risked everything for someone you barely know." "Then I suppose we should get to know each other better," Harrison said. "Starting now, tell me something real about yourself, not about Vincent or running or any of that. Tell me about who you were before all this." Rose was quiet for a moment, then a small smile crossed her face. "I wanted to be a teacher. Before my father's debts, before Vincent, I was studying to teach at a school in San Francisco. I loved reading, loved the idea of helping children discover stories and knowledge. My mother said it was impractical, that I should focus on finding a good husband, but I did not care. I thought if I could just pass the examinations, prove I was capable, maybe I could have that life. What happened? My father lost everything in a bad investment. Then the gambling started. By the time I realized how desperate our situation was, Vincent had already approached him with the offer." She looked down at her hands. "I was so angry. Angry at my father for his weakness, at Vincent for seeing me as something to purchase, at myself for not fighting harder. But mostly I was angry that I would never get to be that teacher, never get to have the life I imagined." Harrison considered this. "The town has been talking about starting a proper school. Right now, the children just learn at home or not at all. If you wanted, once things settled down, you could teach. We have the space on the ranch for a small schoolhouse." Rose's head snapped up. "Do you mean that?" "I do not say things I do not mean. You have the knowledge and the desire. The children around here deserve better than growing up without education. Seems like a good match to me." For the first time since he had found her in his barn, Rose's smile reached her eyes. "I would like that. I would like that very much." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Danny met them at the barn, taking charge of the horses and wagon. "How did it go in town?" he asked Harrison quietly. "We are officially married, but there was a man asking questions. Claimed to be looking for a missing woman on behalf of her worried husband." Danny's weathered face darkened. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing useful. But he will be watching and likely reporting back to whoever sent him. I want you to keep your eyes open. Anyone unfamiliar comes sniffing around the property, I want to know immediately." "You got it, boss." Danny glanced at Rose, who was walking slowly toward the house. "She going to be all right? I hope so. She is tougher than she looks, but she has been through hell." "Margaret would have liked her," Danny said unexpectedly. "She had that same kind of steel underneath." Harrison felt a lump in his throat. Yeah, she would have." That night, after Rose had retired to her room, Harrison sat on his porch with a glass of whiskey and let himself think about what he had done. He had married a woman he barely knew, made himself a target for one of California's most powerful men, and potentially put his ranch and livelihood at risk. By any reasonable measure, it was the act of a fool. But when he thought about Rose's face in the church, the way her voice had steadied as she spoke her vows, the hope that had lit her eyes when he mentioned teaching, he could not bring himself to regret it. Margaret had always said he had too much heart for his own good. Maybe she had been right. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Rose's wound healed cleanly, leaving a puckered scar that she claimed was a small price for freedom. She threw herself into ranch work with surprising enthusiasm, learning to help with the chickens, tend the vegetable garden, and even assist with the horses. Harrison taught her to ride properly, and she proved to be a quick study. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk. Harrison learned about her childhood in San Francisco, her mother who had died when she was 15, her complicated feelings about the father who had sold her future for his debts. Rose learned about Harrison's years building the ranch, his dreams of expanding the herd, his quiet grief for Margaret. "Do you think you will ever truly move on?" Rose asked one evening as they watched the sunset. Harrison thought about it. I think grief does not work the way people expect. You do not move on from losing someone you love. You just learn to carry it differently. Margaret will always be part of me, part of this place. But that does not mean there is no room for anything else. That is a better answer than I expected. You sound surprised. Most men I have known were not so thoughtful about their feelings. Most men you have known were not worth your time, Harrison said bluntly, and Rose laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. A month after their marriage, Harrison took Rose into town again. Sheriff Hawkins stopped them on the street, his expression grave. Harrison got a minute. They followed the sheriff to his office, where he closed the door carefully. That fellow Reed is still in town, and he has been asking a lot of questions. About you specifically, Harrison. Wants to know how long you have been courting, where your wife came from, when exactly she arrived in Yosemite. What have you told him? Harrison asked. Nothing, because it is none of his business. But I did some asking of my own, sent a telegram to a friend in San Francisco. Vincent Barrow has put out word that his wife is missing, possibly kidnapped, and he is offering a reward for information leading to her return. Hawkins looked at Rose. $10,000, madam. That is enough money to make even honest men consider doing dishonest things. Rose paled. I was not kidnapped. I ran away. I believe you, but the law does not always care about such distinctions, especially when there is money involved. A wife is still considered her husband's property in many ways, as much as that sticks in my craw to say. Hawkins leaned back in his chair. Now, the way I see it, you are Rose Clarke, legally married to Harrison here before witnesses and recorded proper. Even if you were Rose Barrow before, that marriage was dissolved the moment you wed Harrison. California does not recognize divorce without cause, Rose said quietly. No, but it recognizes death. And far as I am concerned, Rose Barrow died when Rose Clarke was born. If Vincent Barrow wants to argue otherwise, he can take it up with a judge, and I will be happy to testify that I have witnessed your marriage and can vouch for its legitimacy. Harrison felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you, Sheriff. Do not thank me yet. Reed is not the only one looking. I have heard reports of other men asking questions in Mariposa and Oakhurst. Barrow is casting a wide net. Hawkins stood. I will do what I can to keep them from bothering you, but you need to be careful. A man like Barrow does not take kindly to losing what he thinks belongs to him. As they left the sheriff's office, Rose was shaking. Harrison guided her to the wagon and helped her up, then took the reins. They were almost out of town when a voice called out. Mrs. Barrow. Rose flinched, and Harrison turned to see Thomas Reed striding toward them, his expression triumphant. I knew it was you. Did you really think a simple disguise would fool me? Harrison stepped between Reed and the wagon. You are mistaken, friend. This is my wife, Rose Clarke. Your wife? Reed laughed harshly. You are harboring a fugitive, Mr. Clarke. Rose Barrow is the legal property of her husband, and he wants her returned immediately. Property? Harrison's voice went dangerously quiet. Did you just refer to a human being as property? The law is quite clear. A wife belongs to her husband. Vincent Barrow has every right to reclaim what is his. People were starting to gather, drawn by the commotion. Harrison was aware of their curious stares, aware that this moment could determine everything that followed. He took a breath and raised his voice so everyone could hear. This woman is Rose Clarke, my legal wife, married to me a month ago before Pastor Williams and witnessed by Daniel Morrison and Mrs. Williams herself. The marriage is recorded in the county register. I do not know anything about a Rose Barrow, but I know my own wife, and she is going nowhere with you. Barrow will not accept this, Reed hissed. He has resources you cannot imagine. Then let him take it up with the law. Until then, you need to step away from my wagon before I make you." Reed's hand moved toward his coat, and Harrison's hand dropped to the revolver at his hip. The movement was casual but unmistakable. Several of the watching men shifted, hands moving to their own weapons. Reed was outnumbered and he knew it. "This is not over," Reed said, backing away. "Barrow will come for her himself if he has to." "Let him come," Harrison said, "but he better bring the law with him, because that is the only way he is setting foot on my land." Reed stalked away and the crowd slowly dispersed. Sheriff Hawkins had watched the whole exchange from his office doorway. He gave Harrison a small nod of approval before disappearing back inside. The ride back to the ranch was tense. Rose was pale and silent, her hands clenched in her lap. Harrison let her be until they reached home, then helped her down from the wagon. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I have brought nothing but trouble to you." "You have brought purpose," Harrison corrected. "And if that comes with trouble, so be it. I am not afraid of Vincent Barrow or his hired men." "You should be. You do not know what he is capable of." "Maybe not. But he does not know what I am capable of either." Harrison turned her gently to face him. "Rose, I made you a promise when I offered you my name. I do not break my promises. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Her eyes searched his face. "Why are you so determined to protect me?" It was a fair question, and Harrison found himself searching for an answer that went beyond simple decency or obligation. The truth was, over the past month, Rose had become more than just a woman he was protecting. She had become a friend, a partner in running the ranch, someone whose laughter he looked forward to and whose company he sought out. She had brought life back to his empty house, filled the silence with conversation and warmth. "Because you deserve to be free," he said finally. "And because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger I was helping and became someone I care about." Rose's breath caught. Harrison, whatever she was going to say, was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Danny came running from the barn, rifle in hand. "Riders coming, boss, at least 6 of them." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Get Rose inside and bar the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "I am not hiding while you face them alone," Rose protested. "You are not hiding. You are staying safe. There is a difference." Harrison's tone left no room for argument. "Please, Rose, I need to know you are protected." She hesitated, then nodded. Danny escorted her into the house while Harrison checked his revolver and walked out to meet the approaching riders. They came to a halt in his front yard. 6 hard-looking men led by a 7th who sat his horse with the arrogance of wealth and power. Vincent Barrow was handsome in a cold, aristocratic way. He wore expensive clothes and sat an expensive horse, and everything about him spoke of money and influence. His dark eyes swept over Harrison with barely concealed disdain. "You must be the rancher foolish enough to marry my wife," Barrow said without preamble. "I am Harrison Clarke, and I married my wife, Rose Clarke, a month ago. I do not know anything about your wife." "Do not play games with me, Clarke. I know Rose is here." Reed saw her, identified her positively. "I want her returned immediately, and then we can discuss what kind of compensation will prevent me from having you arrested for kidnapping." "Kidnapping?" Harrison's laugh was harsh. "That is a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" "I have Reed's testimony. I have the fact that my wife disappeared and turned up married to you under suspicious circumstances. I have the fact that you are clearly hiding her." "I am not hiding anyone. My wife is in our home where she belongs." Harrison planted his feet. "And she is not going anywhere with you." Barrow's expression darkened. "You do not seem to understand the situation, Mr. Clarke. I have connections that reach to the highest levels of California government. I can make your life very difficult. I can have this ranch seized, your cattle confiscated. You yourself thrown in jail on any number of charges. All I want is my wife returned to me unharmed, and we can forget this unfortunate incident ever happened." "What you want," Harrison said slowly, "is to reclaim a woman who risked her life to escape you. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of husband you were. How I conduct my marriage is none of your concern. It became my concern when one of your men shot her." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Barrow's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? The woman you are looking for was shot by one of your men while trying to leave. The bullet wound in her side has healed nicely, but it could have killed her. You want to talk about kidnapping? Maybe we should discuss attempted murder." For the first time, Barrow looked uncertain. "I gave no such order. Then you have even less control over your men than I thought." Harrison crossed his arms. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to leave my property. Rose is staying here with me, her legal husband. If you want to contest that, you can take it up with a judge. But I warn you, forcing a woman to return to a man she fled from, especially when there is evidence of violence, is not going to look good for you, no matter how many connections you have." "You are making a grave mistake," Barrow said coldly. "Maybe, but it is my mistake to make." The two men stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Barrow jerked his reins around. "This is not over, Clarke. I will see you ruined for this. You are welcome to try." Barrow and his men rode off in a cloud of dust. Harrison did not move until they were completely out of sight, then let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Danny emerged from the barn, still holding his rifle. "That went better than expected," the ranch hand observed. "Or worse. Depends on whether he makes good on his threats." Harrison headed for the house. "I need to talk to Rose." He found her in the parlor, standing by the window even though he had told her to stay away from it. Her face was pale but composed. "I heard everything." "Rose, he will not stop. You know that, do not you? Vincent never accepts defeat. He will use every resource he has to destroy you, all because of me." Harrison crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Listen to me. Vincent Barrow is a bully and a coward. He is used to getting his way through money and intimidation, but out here, that only takes you so far. I have Sheriff Hawkins on our side, the law on our side, and the truth on our side. That counts for something. It will not be enough, not against him. Then we will make it enough." Harrison squeezed her hands gently. "I am not giving up on you, Rose. I am not letting him take you. We will fight this together, whatever it takes." She looked up at him, and something shifted in her expression. "When did you stop seeing this as just an arrangement?" The question caught him off guard. "I do not know. Sometime between teaching you to ride and listening to you laugh at Danny's terrible jokes. Sometime between watching you stand up to read in town and seeing you face down your fear every single day." He paused. "When did you?" "When you offered me your name without asking for anything in return. When you looked at me like I was a person worth protecting instead of property to be owned." Rose's voice dropped to a whisper. "When I realized I felt safer with you in a month than I felt in 3 years with Vincent." They stood there, hands clasped, the truth of their feelings hanging between them like something fragile and new. Harrison wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and promise everything would be all right. But he remembered her words on the day they married, her insistence that this would not be a true marriage in any sense but legal. He would not push, would not take advantage of her vulnerability. Instead, he raised her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Whatever happens, Rose, you are not alone in this. Remember that." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I know. That is what scares me most. I could not bear it if something happened to you because of me." Over the following days, the tension mounted. True to his word, Vincent Barrow began making Harrison's life difficult. Supplies ordered from San Francisco were mysteriously delayed or canceled. Business contacts who had been friendly suddenly became distant. There were even whispers that Barrow was trying to pressure the bank that held Harrison's land note, though the bank manager assured him nothing would come of it. But Barrow had underestimated the community of Yosemite. The people who lived in this rough country had little love for wealthy outsiders who threw their weight around. When word spread about what was happening, neighbors began showing up at Harrison's ranch to offer support. Mr. Chen at the general store extended credit and made sure Harrison got his supplies, Barrow's interference or not. Pastor Williams made it clear from his pulpit that he stood behind the marriage he had performed. Even the local ranchers, men who normally kept to themselves, let it be known that they would not take kindly to anyone trying to force a woman away from her legal husband. The support meant everything, but Harrison knew it might not be enough. A month after Barrow's visit, Sheriff Hawkins rode out to the ranch with troubling news. "Barrow has filed a complaint with the federal marshal's office," the sheriff said grimly. "Claims you kidnapped his wife and are holding her against her will. A marshal is coming from Sacramento to investigate." Harrison felt his stomach drop. "When? Could be any day now. I sent word that the charges are baseless, but they have to investigate officially." Hawkins looked at Rose, who had come out to hear the news. "Madam, they are going to want to interview you privately. You need to be prepared to tell your story." "I can do that," Rose said, though her voice trembled slightly. "There is something else," Hawkins continued reluctantly. "Barrow is claiming you are not mentally sound, that you fled in a state of confusion and were taken advantage of by Harrison here. He has a doctor prepared to testify that you have a history of hysteria and delusions." Rose's face flushed with anger. "That is a lie. I was never sick or confused. Vincent tried to have me declared unstable last year when I objected to him locking me in my room for a week. It was his way of keeping me controlled." "I figured as much," Hawkins said. "But this marshal will not know that. You will need to be calm, rational, and clear when you speak to him. Any sign of emotion or upset, and Barrow's lawyer will use it to paint you as exactly what he claims." "That is not fair," Harrison protested. "She has every right to be upset about false accusations. Ver does not enter into it. This is about perception and the law." Hawkins stood. "I will stand with you both when the marshal arrives, testify to what I know. But you need to prepare for the possibility that they might try to take Rose into custody pending the investigation." "Over my dead body," Harrison said flatly. "Let's hope it does not come to that." That night, Harrison found Rose sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the dark mountains. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I keep thinking about running again," Rose said quietly. "Just disappearing into the night and sparing you all this. And I keep thinking about how I would track you down and drag you back, because that is not a solution." Harrison turned to look at her. "Rose, running did not work before. It will not work now. The only way through this is together, facing it head on. I am so tired of fighting, tired of being afraid. I know, but you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You survived 3 years with a man who treated you like property. You had the courage to risk everything for your freedom. You can survive this too." Rose was quiet for a moment, then said, "Harrison, if the marshal decides in Vincent's favor, if they try to take me back, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise you will let me go. Promise you will not fight so hard that you get yourself killed or lose everything you have built." She turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "I will not let Vincent destroy you. I will go with them if I have to, but I need to know you will be all right." "No." "Harrison, no," he repeated firmly. "I am not promising that. You are my wife, Rose. In the eyes of God and the law, you are mine to protect, and I take that seriously. I'm not letting Vincent Barrow or anyone else take you against your will, even if it costs you everything." Harrison reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Even then, because you have become more important to me than any of it. The ranch, the cattle, the land, it does not mean anything if I lose you." "When did that happen?" Rose whispered. "When did I become so important?" "I think it started the moment I found you in my barn and saw that look in your eyes. Like you would rather die than give up. I recognized that look because I felt the same way after Margaret died. You reminded me that there are still things worth fighting for." Rose leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting closed. "I have been so afraid of letting myself feel anything for you. Afraid that if I did, Vincent would find some way to use it against us. But I cannot pretend anymore, Harrison. I care about you. More than I thought I could care about anyone after what I went through." Harrison's heart was pounding. "Rose, I do not want to push you into anything. I know you said this was just an arrangement. It stopped being just an arrangement for me weeks ago." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. "I think I started falling in love with you the day you taught me to ride, and you were so patient even when I nearly fell off 3 times. Or maybe it was when you added those books to our purchases without thinking I would notice. Or when you talked about Margaret without bitterness, just love and grief mixed together. I do not know exactly when it happened, only that it did." Harrison felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "You love me. Is that so surprising? You have been nothing but kind and protective. You have asked for nothing in return for everything you have given me. You have made me feel valued and safe. How could I not love you?" He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, when instead she tilted her face up to meet him, he kissed her. It was gentle and careful, a question more than a demand. Rose made a soft sound and kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you too," Harrison said roughly. "I have been fighting it because I thought you needed time, needed space, but I cannot pretend anymore either. You have brought light back into my life, Rose. You have made me want to live again instead of just survive." She smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. "So what do we do now? Now we stop treating this like an arrangement and start treating it like what it really is, a marriage, a partnership, a love worth fighting for." Harrison kissed her again, deeper this time. "And when that marshal comes, he will see exactly that, a husband and wife who chose each other." The marshal arrived 3 days later. His name was James Garrett, a no-nonsense man in his 40s with steel-gray eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened to Vincent Barrow's accusations, then insisted on interviewing Rose privately. Harrison hated leaving her alone with the marshal, but he had no choice. He paced the porch while Danny tried unsuccessfully to distract him with talk of cattle and repairs. It felt like hours before the door finally opened and the marshal emerged. "Mr. Clarke, could you join us, please?" Harrison entered the parlor to find Rose sitting calmly, her hands folded in her lap. She gave him a small smile that eased some of his anxiety. Marshal Garrett gestured for him to sit. "I have heard Mrs. Clarke's account of events," the marshal said. "Now I would like to hear yours." Harrison told the truth. He explained finding Rose wounded in his barn, her story of escaping an abusive marriage, his decision to offer her protection through marriage. He did not embellish or exaggerate, simply laid out the facts as they had happened. When he finished, Marshal Garrett sat back and studied them both. "Mr. Barrow has painted a very different picture. He claims his wife was mentally unstable, prone to delusions and hysterical episodes. He suggests you took advantage of her confused state." "That is a lie," Rose said, her voice steady. "I was not confused or delusional. I was desperate to escape a man who controlled every aspect of my life and had begun to threaten my safety. The bullet wound I showed you, Marshal, came from one of Vincent's men shooting me as I tried to leave. Does that sound like the action of a concerned husband? Mr. Barrow claims he never authorized such violence, perhaps not explicitly, but he created an environment where his men felt empowered to shoot an unarmed woman rather than let her go. That speaks volumes about the kind of man he is. Garrett turned to Harrison. And you, Mr. Clarke. You expect me to believe you married a complete stranger out of pure altruism. Not a complete stranger. I spent days talking with her, learning her story, seeing her courage. And no, not pure altruism. I saw a woman who reminded me why I built this ranch in the first place, why I wanted a life out here, to be free, to live by my own rules. Rose deserved that same freedom. Harrison reached over and took her hand. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with her. So yes, our marriage started as a practical arrangement, but it has become something real. The Marshal's expression was unreadable. I will need to verify your story with other witnesses. Pastor Williams, the sheriff, anyone else who can corroborate the timeline and circumstances. Of course, Harrison said. We have nothing to hide. Marshal Garrett spent the next 2 days in Yosemite, interviewing everyone connected to the case. He spoke with Pastor Williams, who confirmed performing the marriage ceremony and finding nothing unusual about the couple. He interviewed Sheriff Hawkins, who testified to Harrison's good character and Rose's obvious sincerity. He even spoke with Mr. Chen and several of the neighboring ranchers, all of whom supported Harrison and Rose's account. On the third day, Marshal Garrett called everyone together at the sheriff's office. Vincent Barrow was there with his lawyer, looking confident and smug. Thomas Reed stood behind them, his expression cold. Harrison and Rose sat on the opposite side, with Sheriff Hawkins beside them. I have completed my investigation, Marshal Garrett announced, and I have reached a conclusion based on the evidence presented. Barrow leaned forward. And I find no evidence of kidnapping or coercion. Rose Zimmerman willingly left her marriage to Vincent Barrow due to what I believe were legitimate concerns for her safety. She subsequently entered into a legal marriage with Harrison Clarke, which was performed by a licensed pastor, witnessed by upstanding citizens, and properly recorded. The marriage certificate is valid and binding. But she is my wife, Barrow protested. She belongs to me. She was your wife, Mr. Barrow. The moment she married Mr. Clarke, any previous marital bond was dissolved. California law may not have robust divorce provisions, but it does recognize that a second marriage supersedes a first when entered into in good faith. This is outrageous. I have rights. You have the right to petition for annulment if you believe the second marriage was invalid. But based on my investigation, I see no grounds for that. Mrs. Clarke was of sound mind when she wed, there was no coercion, and the marriage has been consummated. Garrett looked at Rose. You have confirmed that, have you not, Mrs. Clarke? Rose met the Marshal's eyes steadily. Yes, I have. It was not entirely true, but it was necessary, and Harrison squeezed her hand in support. Barrow's face flushed with rage. You are making a terrible mistake, Marshal. I have connections. Your connections do not change the law, Mr. Barrow. I understand you are upset about your wife leaving, but the proper legal remedy is not kidnapping charges against an innocent man. It is accepting that she made her choice and moving on with your life. I will not accept this. You do not have a choice. Marshal Garrett stood. My official finding is that no crime has been committed. Mr. and Mrs. Clarke are free to continue with their lives. If you wish to pursue this matter further, Mr. Barrow, you will need to do so through the civil courts. But I warn you, Forcing a woman to return to a marriage she fled from is not likely to win you any sympathy from a judge. Barrow surged to his feet. This is not over, Clarke. I will see you destroyed for this. Threatening a citizen in front of a federal marshal is not wise, Mr. Barrow, Garrett said mildly. I suggest you return to San Francisco and focus on your business interests. For a moment, Harrison thought Barrow might actually attack him. The man's hands were clenched into fists, his face contorted with fury. But his lawyer pulled him back, whispering urgently. Finally, Barrow turned on his heel and stormed out, Reed following like a shadow. After they left, Harrison let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Rose slumped in her chair, the tension draining out of her. Marshal Garrett regarded them both with something that might have been sympathy. A word of advice, Mr. Clarke. Men like Vincent Barrow do not forget slights easily. He may have lost this battle, but he will look for other ways to strike at you. Be careful. We will, Harrison promised. And thank you, Marshal, for seeking the truth instead of just accepting the word of a wealthy man. It is my job to be impartial. Though I admit, after meeting Mr. Barrow, I find it very easy to believe your wife's account of her marriage. Garrett tipped his hat to Rose. Good luck to you both. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. After the marshal left, Sheriff Hawkins clapped Harrison on the shoulder. That could have gone a lot worse. You two should celebrate. Harrison looked at Rose, saw the relief and exhaustion written across her face, and made a decision. Actually, Sheriff, would you mind keeping an eye on the ranch for a few days? I think Rose and I could use some time away from all this. Where will you go? There is a cabin up in the mountains about a day's ride from here. Margaret and I used to go there when we needed to escape for a while. It is isolated and peaceful. I think we could both use some peace right about now. Rose's eyes brightened. That sounds wonderful. They left the next morning, their saddlebags packed with supplies. The ride into the mountains was beautiful, the autumn air crisp and clean. They followed a trail that wound through pine forests and across crystal streams, climbing steadily until the ranch was far behind them. The cabin was small but well maintained, a single room with a stone fireplace, a bed, and a table. Harrison had stocked it with firewood and basic supplies on previous trips. As Rose explored the simple space, he started a fire and unpacked their food. It is perfect, Rose said, standing at the window and looking out at the mountains. I feel like I can breathe for the first time in weeks. Harrison came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. That was the idea. I wanted you to have a place where you felt completely safe, where Vincent and his threats could not touch you. She leaned back against him. I do feel safe. With you, I always feel safe. They spent the next 3 days in peaceful isolation. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams and fears. They explored the surrounding woods, found a waterfall that cascaded into a clear pool, cooked simple meals over the fire. And at night, they lay together in the cabin's bed, holding each other close. On their second night there, as firelight flickered across the walls, Rose turned to Harrison with a question in her eyes. I want this to be a real marriage, she said softly. In every way. I know I said in the beginning that I could not after everything with Vincent, but you are not Vincent. You have never made me feel like property or something to be used. You make me feel cherished. Harrison cupped her face gently. Are you sure? I do not want you to feel pressured. I am sure. I love you, Harrison, and I want to be your wife in every sense of the word. He kissed her then, tender and loving, and she responded with a passion that had been building for months. When they finally came together, it was with a gentleness and care that brought tears to Rose's eyes. This was nothing like her experiences with Vincent, where intimacy had been a duty and often a violation. This was love, pure and simple, two people choosing each other completely. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Rose whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what this could be. What it should be. For giving me back something I thought Vincent had destroyed forever." Harrison pulled her closer. "You gave me something too. You gave me a reason to live again, to hope again. You brought joy back into my life. I will spend every day trying to deserve you." "You already do," she said, and kissed him again. They returned to the ranch renewed and ready to face whatever came next. Vincent made a few more half-hearted attempts to cause trouble, but without the law on his side, his options were limited. Eventually, word reached them that he had returned to San Francisco and begun divorce proceedings, claiming abandonment. Harrison and Rose let him, knowing it would only strengthen their own legal position. As autumn turned to winter, Rose began working on plans for the schoolhouse. Harrison and Danny started clearing land for the building, and neighbors pitched in to help with construction. By spring of 1879, a small one-room schoolhouse stood on the Clarke property, and Rose began teaching the children of Yosemite. She proved to be a natural teacher, patient and enthusiastic. The children adored her, and their parents were grateful for the education she provided. Harrison would often stop by during the day, just to watch her in action, and feel his heart swell with pride and love. Their first wedding anniversary arrived in September. Harrison marked the occasion by taking Rose back to the mountain cabin, where they spent a week in blissful solitude. It was there, in that peaceful place, that Rose told him she was pregnant. "Are you happy?" she asked nervously, watching his face for his reaction. Harrison's response was to sweep her into his arms and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. "Happy, Rose, I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic." Their son was born the following May, a healthy boy with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn chin. They named him Samuel, after Harrison's father. Harrison held his son for the first time and wept, thinking about how much his life had changed in less than 2 years. He had gone from a lonely widower going through the motions to a husband and father with everything to live for. Rose recovered quickly from the birth, determined not to give up teaching for too long. They hired a young woman from town to help with Samuel during school hours, and life settled into a new rhythm. Vincent Barrow made one final attempt to disrupt their happiness. In the fall of 1880, he sent lawyers with a petition claiming that Samuel was legally his son, conceived during Rose's marriage to him. It was a desperate, spiteful move, and easily disproven by the timeline. The petition was dismissed, and they heard nothing more from Vincent after that. Years passed, each one bringing new blessings. A daughter named Margaret arrived in 1882, followed by twin boys in 1885. The ranch prospered as Harrison and Danny expanded the herd and took on more land. Rose's school grew, eventually requiring a second teacher to help manage all the students. Through it all, Harrison and Rose's love only deepened. They had weathered so much together: fear, threats, legal battles, the normal trials of building a life. But they had done it side by side, partners in every sense. On their 10th anniversary, Harrison woke early and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Rose. He made coffee and sat on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. 10 years since he had found a wounded woman in his barn. 10 years since he had made the impulsive decision to offer her his name and his protection. It had been the best decision of his life. He heard the door open behind him and smiled as Rose joined him, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill. She settled into his arms as naturally as breathing. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how lucky I am. How different my life would be if I had not gone to the barn that particular morning, or if I had turned you away." "I would be dead," Rose said simply. Vincent would have found me eventually, or the wound would have killed me. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You saved mine too. I was not living before you came, just existing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children begin to stir in the house. Samuel was 13 now, already taking on responsibilities around the ranch. Margaret was 6, bright and curious, always asking questions. The twins were 3, whirlwinds of energy and mischief. "Do you ever regret it?" Rose asked quietly. "Taking on Vincent's wrath, risking everything for someone you barely knew." Harrison turned her to face him. "Not for a single moment. You and our children, this life we have built together, it is everything I ever wanted. Everything Margaret hoped I would find again. I think she would be happy to know I did not waste my second chance." "I like to think she is watching over us," Rose said. "That she approves. I know she does." Harrison kissed his wife softly, "because she loved fiercely and would understand why I could not turn away from someone who needed help. She would have done the same." Rose smiled. "Then I am grateful to her too. For choosing such a good man, for building this ranch, for leaving a legacy of love that I could step into." "Our legacy now," Harrison corrected. "Yours and mine together." Later that day, the whole family rode into Yosemite for a celebration. The town had grown over the years, but it still maintained its tight-knit community feel. People called out greetings as the Clarks passed. Children ran up to say hello to Mrs. Clarke, their beloved teacher. Pastor Williams, now in his 60s, met them at the church with his wife. 10 years, he marveled. "Seems like yesterday I was marrying you too. I remember thinking it was rather sudden, but I could see something special in your eyes, both of you." "You took a chance on us," Harrison said. "We have never forgotten that. All I did was officiate. You two did the hard work of building a real marriage. Be proud of that." They gathered with friends for a meal at the hotel. Sheriff Hawkins, now gray-haired but still sharp, raised a toast. "To Harrison and Rose Clarke, may you have 10 more years of happiness and 10 after that." "Hear, hear." The crowd echoed. Mr. Chen presented them with a gift, a beautiful silk scarf for Rose and a new saddle for Harrison. "For our friends," he said simply, "who have always treated me with respect and kindness." As the evening wore on and the children grew tired, Harrison and Rose slipped away for a few moments alone. They stood on the hotel balcony, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the sunset. "Thank you," Rose said, not for the first time. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for offering your name when you could have walked away, for loving me when I thought I could never be loved again." She took his hand. "For giving me a life beyond my wildest dreams." Harrison pulled her close. "You gave me the same love. You brought me back to life. You made me believe in second chances and new beginnings. You gave me a family and a future. Then we are even." "No," Harrison said, smiling. "We are blessed. There is a difference." They returned to the ranch that night under a canopy of stars. The children piled into bed, exhausted from the day's excitement. Harrison and Rose stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching the twins sleep. "You think they will understand someday?" Rose asked softly. "What we went through to be together, maybe. When they are older, we can tell them the whole story. How their mother was the bravest person I ever met, and how their father was stubborn enough to fight the whole world for her." Rose laughed quietly. "It is a good story. It is our story, and it is far from over." They retreated to their own bedroom, the room that had once been Harrison's alone but was now thoroughly theirs. Rose had added her touches over the years, curtains in cheerful colors, books on the shelves, photographs of their growing family. It was a room filled with love and life. As they prepared for bed, Harrison thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first moment in the barn, through the fear and uncertainty, the legal battles and threats, to this peaceful domestic scene. Every choice, every risk had been worth it. Rose caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Just thinking about how much I love you, how grateful I am that you trusted me enough to accept my offer." "I did not have many options at the time," she teased. "You had the option to run again, to keep running and never stop. Instead, you stayed and built a life with me. That took more courage than running ever could have." She crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You made it easy to stay. You made me want to stop running and start living." They climbed into bed together, fitting against each other as perfectly as always. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines and cattle lowed in the distant pastures. Inside, all was warm and safe. "Harrison," Rose murmured sleepily. "Yes, love." "If you could go back to that morning 10 years ago, knowing everything that would happen, would you still do it? Would you still offer me your name?" Harrison did not hesitate. "In a heartbeat. Every single time. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rose Clarke." She smiled against his chest. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, too." They drifted off to sleep, secure in their love and their life together. The years ahead would bring more challenges and more joys. Samuel would grow up to take over the ranch. Margaret would become a teacher like her mother. The twins would head west to seek their fortunes before eventually returning home. Harrison and Rose would grow old together, their love never diminishing but only growing richer with time. Decades later, Harrison would sit on that same porch as an old man, Rose's hand in his, and marvel at the beautiful life they had created from such desperate beginnings. Their children and grandchildren would gather around, begging for the story of how Grandpa Harrison found Grandma Rose bleeding in his barn and offered her his name. And every time he told it, he would end the same way. "It was the best decision I ever made. Your grandmother gave me a reason to live again, and I gave her the freedom to be herself. Together, we built something that has lasted a lifetime." Rose would squeeze his hand and add, "And it all started with a moment of kindness. Never underestimate the power of choosing to help someone in need." That one choice changed everything. Their grandchildren would nod solemnly, storing away the lesson. Then the moment would pass and they would run off to play, leaving Harrison and Rose alone on the porch, hands still clasped, hearts still intertwined, but those days were still far in the future. For now, on this 10th anniversary of their marriage, Harrison and Rose simply held each other and slept peacefully, knowing they had found something precious and rare. They had found true love, born from desperation but nurtured into something strong and lasting. The widowed rancher and the woman he found sleeping in his barn had become partners, lovers, best friends. They had faced down threats and built a family. They had turned a marriage of convenience into a love story for the ages, and they lived happily, truly happily, for the rest of their days.